The great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
Two nations, once allies, now sworn enemies. And the world is watching, wondering if this rivalry could ignite something far bigger. The United States of America and Iran were not always adversaries. In fact, there was a time when they stood side by side, trading weapons, intelligence, influence, and trust. But in 1979, something shattered. One of America's strongest pillars in the Middle East collapsed almost overnight. Iran, armed by Washington, funded by Washington, politically protected by Washington, transformed into a revolutionary Islamic Republic that openly called the United States its greatest enemy. But here's the truth. This didn't begin in 1979. It didn't happen overnight. And it wasn't just a revolution. To understand why these two former partners now stand on the edge of global confrontation, we have to go back, way back. Welcome to another episode of Shadow Post. In 1951, Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized the country's oil industry. Until then, much of Iran's oil wealth had been controlled by foreign interests, particularly British companies. For many Iranians, nationalization was a moment of pride, a declaration of sovereignty. But in Washington and London, it raised alarms. In 1953, a CIA-backed operation helped remove Mossadegh from power and strengthened the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah would go on to become one of America's most important regional allies during the Cold War. From Washington's perspective, Iran was a strategic partner, a buffer against Soviet influence in the Middle East. From the perspective of many Iranians, however, foreign powers had interfered directly in their democracy. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the Shah pursued rapid modernization. He expanded infrastructure. He invested heavily in the military. He promoted Western-style reforms. Tehran became a symbol of modernization in the region. But modernization did not mean political freedom. Opposition voices were suppressed. Political dissent was monitored and punished. Religious leaders criticized what they saw as growing Western influence. Economic growth created wealth, but also widened inequality. Beneath the surface, dissatisfaction was building. One of the Shah's most vocal critics was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. After openly opposing the Shah's policies, Khomeini was exiled. From abroad, he continued to speak against the monarchy. His recorded speeches were distributed secretly inside Iran, gaining influence among religious and political groups. By the late 1970s, protests had intensified. What began as scattered demonstrations turned into nationwide unrest. Security forces responded with force. The unrest only grew stronger. In January 1979, the Shah left Iran. Within weeks, Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile to massive public support. The monarchy collapsed. Iran declared itself an Islamic Republic. Power shifted from a pro-Western monarch to a revolutionary government that rejected American influence. The strategic partnership between Washington and Tehran was effectively over. In November 1979, Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage. The crisis lasted 444 days. It dominated U.S. news coverage and reshaped American public opinion about Iran. Diplomatic relations were severed, trust was gone, and a new phase of confrontation had begun. The revolution did not just transform Iran's politics, it destabilized the region. In 1980, Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein saw an opportunity. Iran was internally shaken. Its military leadership had been purged. Its political system was still consolidating power. In September 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. The Iran-Iraq War had begun. What was expected to be a short campaign turned into one of the longest and most brutal wars of the 20th century. For 8 years, both sides suffered massive casualties: trench warfare, missile strikes on cities, chemical weapons. The conflict drained resources, devastated infrastructure, and hardened Iran's revolutionary leadership. For the United States, the war created a strategic dilemma. Washington feared the spread of Iran's revolutionary ideology across the region. At the same time, instability in the Persian Gulf threatened global oil supplies. The conflict deepened mistrust on all sides. But the confrontation was about to expand beyond Iran's borders. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon to confront Palestinian militant groups operating there. The invasion created a power vacuum in southern Lebanon. Iran saw an opportunity. Members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard were deployed to Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Their mission was not conventional warfare. It was organization, training, and ideological influence. From this environment emerged Hezbollah. Initially a small militant movement, Hezbollah adopted both political and military strategies. It received financial and logistical support from Iran. Its stated goal? Resist Israeli occupation and Western influence in Lebanon. But its actions would have global consequences. In April 1983, a suicide bombing targeted the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. Dozens were killed. 6 months later, in October 1983, another attack struck the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut. More than 240 American service members were killed. It was one of the deadliest attacks on U.S. forces since World War II. The message was clear. The conflict between Iran and the United States had moved beyond diplomacy. There was no formal declaration of war, no open battlefield between the two countries. Instead, the confrontation operated in the shadows through alliances, militias, and proxy forces. Washington accused Iran of supporting Hezbollah. Tehran denied direct responsibility but continued to expand its regional network. The pattern was emerging: indirect conflict, strategic deniability, escalation without formal war. By the late 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War ended in exhaustion. Neither side had achieved decisive victory. But Iran had learned an important lesson. Direct confrontation with superior military powers carried immense cost. Asymmetric strategy was more effective. Influence could be projected without conventional war, through allies, through ideology, through proxy networks. The United States, meanwhile, increasingly viewed Iran not just as a hostile state, but as a sponsor of destabilizing forces across the Middle East. The rivalry was no longer about a revolution. It had become structural, strategic, long-term. By the end of the 1980s, the transformation was complete. In less than a decade, an American ally had become an adversary. A monarchy had become a theocracy. A regional power had built a network beyond its borders. The United States and Iran were no longer partners. They were locked in a conflict that had no clear battlefield, and the next chapter would move from proxy warfare to nuclear tensions. Thank you for watching.